Well, good morning, everybody. I think we can get started. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to have lots of rich discussion and leave plenty of time for questions as well. So I hope you really enjoy this morning's session. I'll just start by introducing us. My name is Matt Hayes. I'm Managing Director of Technology from Sage. I'm joined by Christine, Chief Operating Officer at Skilltype, Karim, Dean of Libraries at Stony Brook University, and Paul, Dean of University Libraries at Wayne State University. Both Karim and Paul actually in relatively new roles, particularly Paul. And we're going to be talking to you this morning about library skills. What I will do first is just share with you some findings of a report that Technology from Sage and Skilltype have just published, examining those skills, both current and future. And then Karim, Paul, and Christine will share some initial reflections, and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions. And if you're using the Wova app, if I pronounced that right, do pop your questions into there, and I'll keep monitoring it through the conversation to make sure I take your questions. If not, don't worry, we'll have mics going around as well, so we can take your questions at the end. And comments, of course, as well. So let me start very quickly with some key highlights from the report. Hopefully just see these as provocations. So this is a report that's the third in a series that Technology from Sage has done on librarian futures. We did one back in 2021 at Charleston on the patron workflow, where I hope we showed some really interesting insights on how that workflow is evolving and how the librarian's role is changing. Then we looked more deeper into the student workflow specifically, and particularly areas such as student success earlier this year. And earlier this week, we published a third report, which we call Librarian Futures Part 3, Librarian Skills. And we worked with Skilltype there to look at some of Skilltype's unique data on librarian skills in their talent management platform. We wanted to compare different perspectives from librarians and their library leadership on the skills that are required both now and in the future, and look at areas of misalignment, as well as provide some actionable insights for upskilling and training. In terms of the data, it's data from around 2,500 library professionals on Skilltype across 72 different libraries, where they are sharing their skills, both current and desired, as well as a survey that we did using the Sage network of around 300 library professionals from just under 50 countries, but predominantly the US, the UK, and Europe. And we also did some librarian interviews. And you can download the report at librarianfutures.com. So sharing with you some key findings. First of all, we produced what I think is a really interesting taxonomy of self-identified skills that librarians have, organized into three areas of information management skills, interpersonal leadership skills, and community development. And of course, we'll share these slides on the website after so you can access them. I think what's interesting there is just seeing the diverse range of skills that librarians have, both traditional and transferable. But we did notice that amongst the traditional skills, when we were looking at some reports from Ithaca, library leaders do talk about a reduced need for staff in traditional fields, such as cataloging and access. And so we think there is scope here to keep expanding librarian skills to evolve as their roles shift, as some elements of librarianship, such as those, are automated in the future. We also noticed both alignment and divergence between library leaders and their teams. So on the left-hand side here, you see the most popular interests of skills amongst library professionals. And on the right-hand side, you see those identified by library directors. If you look at the areas of synergy, first of all, really reassuring to see areas like EDI and diversity that we talk a lot about at conferences such as this, as well as traditional themes like collection management, but also emerging themes of the last few years, such as student success. And anecdotally, in our interviews, we found a real focus on being more embedded in the student workflow, supporting student engagement and retention. But we saw some divergence, particularly around the area of vendor and other software tools. We found that library directors really want to see their librarians engaged in understanding tools like LibGuides, Microsoft 365, those kind of vendor tools, whereas library professionals themselves are less interested in those and more interested in transferable and general skills. In terms of future development, we asked library professionals how often they spoke to different people around developing their skill set. And I think there's both positive things there and areas for further discussion. The most notable one for me is that 75% of librarians never or rarely speak to students about their future skills. In some respects, of course, understandable, why would you speak to a student rather than your line manager? But in others, if you're focused on student success, maybe we should see more engagement there with students about new tools they're using and ways in which librarians could support them, such as AI, of course. And although a good majority do speak to their line manager regularly about their skills, as many as 20% never or rarely speak to their line manager about their future skills. So there's clearly an area there for more engagement from leadership and librarians on their skills for the future. And now, first mention of AI. So I bet you thought it was going to come up. This is really interesting. So when we asked librarians how confident they feel advising their students on different subjects, lots of confidence in traditional areas that you would expect, which is, of course, really positive. But as many as 28% of librarians did not feel at all confident advising students on the responsible use of AI. And a lesser figure, but still a significant one, 13% not at all confident advising students on how to understand data. And if you think that data and AI is going to be a key theme amongst students and researchers over the next few years, that's clearly an opportunity, I think, for librarian skills. So before I hand over to my colleagues, I just wanted to finish with this great quote from one of our interviews. What do we want the role of the librarians and the curators to be here? Because if we don't define that, it will be defined for us. So in general, we hope the report is a really positive message, the areas of focus and improvement, but there's so much potential, particularly around areas like AI, for librarians to be more involved. I'm going to hand over now to Karim, who's going to share some of his reflections.
Thank you, Matt. This is a really great study, a research study. I mean, it's unveiled today, correct? It's going to be shared.
Exactly.
So read it. It's like 55 pages.
Exactly.
So, and also the part 1 and part 2, these are really, really good studies. So, my reaction, when I'm going to focus more on the library administration because those are my peers, so I can make soft public shaming. So, like one of the finding that library administrators want library professional to focus on LibGuides, LibCal, Zoom, Microsoft 365. Really? Because, I mean, what's the job of the library administrator? Is leadership, high-level vision, mission, where the library should go, how the library would align with the university, or if you're not in academic world, with your like the parent organization. Even if you're independent, like the Library of Congress, you serving people. This was a surprise to me, frankly. I'm in the field for like more than 35 years in academia and also educational in Canada, Algeria, and the US. So my message for my colleagues, wake up. Like really, I mean, this kind of technophobia and this kind of focus on the tools. I know in the report you're mentioning because they invest in it, probably, but typically is just the LibGuide piece because like Microsoft, those are campus IT, and the big, expensive Zoom is paid typically by the campus IT, not the library. This is lack of vision. Well, there's one good thing because there's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's no mention of accessibility, but there was the focus on part 2, but there was no focus on accessibility because usually, personally, I add the A to the DEI side. So that's a good thing that professionals and leaders are focusing on the EI. Whether it's performative or not, at least it's out there, so it's a good thing. Student success too, finally gets kind of bubbled up. It's really important to be embedded in student success. Part 2 of the report, not this one, is focusing more on that. Now, Also, I'm surprised that for Gen AI, generative AI, it was not mentioned at all, which is like surprise, because November, typically, the big jump happened a year ago with ChatGPT by OpenAI. Generative AI has been for a while, like 6-7 years, and there was different version, the predecessor of ChatGPT, but the big thing happened in November, and like most, based on the survey, there is no there, and librarians feel like they're not ready, or there is no upskilling. And also from library administrators, there is no push or no open conversation. So it doesn't appear, maybe it is, but doesn't appear in the data here. So what's the AI role? Like, if you, in the morning, AI was mentioned many times, and you feel like, why are we talking about AI? I've been talking about AI for 10 years. And I said in many times, I'm tired of talking about AI, and nothing happened. Because even in the survey, people like showing this is as a trend. It's not a trend, it's happening to you, and if you don't use it, it's going to be imposed on you, and you have to deal with it, and you may lose your job too. Because if you're not having this discussion on your campus IT, and what's the role of IT, what's the impact on your daily job, whether you're in reference, cataloging, technical services, instruction, it's going to happen, just a matter of time. Sometimes people feel like I had conversation with my colleagues too, and people like off the record, they will admit, we don't know what to do, which is partly true too, but can you do something? 2 days ago, OpenAI unveiled OpenAI Dev, and they put out their tools basically for non-programmers to help you kind of do something with it. There's also a side of, whenever we talk about AI, people say ethics, privacy. Yes, of course, ethics and privacy is extremely important. I'm glad Biden administration issued an executive order. It's lengthy, it's a good report. In UK, they had an AI summit, and they invited China, which is like the prime minister did the right thing by inviting China. There is something, it's happening. It's just like we're out of cycle. There's like we're 20, 30 years behind, and we're just observing things happening to us. What to do? Do something. You say, I don't have a budget, but you have here, you have your brain. So you could do things. I give you Stony Brook libraries. We have two of my people here. So when ChatGPT was out, they literally jumped on it. They're telling them like kind of what things we could do in terms of instruction, in terms of like issuing guidelines, having conversation with students, having workshops. So it's happening. Just you need to do something. We also create a new position. We repurposed position. It was a hard decision, because if you say like, okay, everything is important, nothing is important, you have to prioritize. And if AI is there, then you need kind of new people and also upskill your people. I guess I exceeded my 5 minutes.
No, that was perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I also really appreciated the opportunity to read and to react to this report. I thought it was really well done and really thought-provoking. So I wanted to share just a few things that I found particularly striking in the report. I think one is similar to what Karim spoke to in terms of library administration and leadership, and the focus on I would say, I guess, things that are really not about strategic positioning of the library. And one of the things that I was really particularly surprised was that did not come up more strongly in the results was really related to what you know, the relational turn, kind of the social aspects of how libraries focus in community, right? So I think that we see a lot of talk about you know, things that require partnerships on campus, research data management services, student success, which did come up, which are necessarily collaborative endeavors for libraries. But I think that those are things that are not just known inherently by us. Those are things that require skills that must be learned, must be practiced, must be exercised, and those were things that I would have really expected to come up a little bit more strongly from a library director's perspective, is I think that those things are really, truly critical to the strategic positioning of libraries within their communities, whether those are their campuses or broader sorts of community. And I also thought it was really interesting that that didn't come up all that strongly, despite the fact that if you look at the skills taxonomies, there are kind of two broad categories, personal and community skills, and then interpersonal and leadership skills that are both very much speak to this topic. So that was one thing that I really found particularly interesting in the report. I think another thing that was striking to me was the lack of conversation between supervisors and employees on learning goals, which really made me think about, if we're to be organizations that are responsive to our communities, to broader technological and changes in the information environment, we fundamentally have to be learning organizations. And if we're not doing something as basic on a regular basis as having conversations with our employees about what their learning objectives are, I mean, it just strikes me as fundamentally really problematic for how we adapt to the future. Also makes me think about how we might be intentional about creating other organizational practices and structures for encouraging learning throughout the organization. So you think about something like AI, for example, which is a rapidly moving target. How do we create space for folks to not only learn and keep learning these rapidly evolving things, but give them some space to try things and to learn as they go and to learn with partners across campus. So that learning environment, the whole library as learning environment for our own folks is one thing that really came to mind for me in reading the report. And then the last thing that, this is really a set of questions that were going through my head, so I don't really have a specific thing to say here, but the survey was really of academic libraries, which is important, I think, for probably many of us here. But as somebody, so part of the university library system at Wayne State is the School of Information Sciences. So I've started to be thinking about library education, library skills in a broader context in the few weeks I've been there. And it really just occurred to me, like, how might this report have been different or not if, say, public librarians or special librarians had been included in the survey? How might some of the skills that they identified, and particularly related how they relate to community, have changed? And what might we have, as academic librarians, have been able to learn from those perspectives? So those are the three things that were really striking to me about the report.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here today and talk about this topic that we're all so passionate about. I want to take us back a little bit in terms of what we showed earlier and get to some of my big takeaways, which have to do with the fact that there's actually a fourth category of skills related to data, AI, user experience, and assessment within the skill type vocabulary, but those things are just not coming up as often. And my takeaway from the report and working with customers, the survey, interviews we've done, is that these information skills are their comfort zone, is what we know how to do. And it, in many ways, concentration on the information, which is for the people that we work with, is squeezing out the space for developing some of these other skills related to really listening to the community, understanding what people need, being a bridge and a relationship builder. And so we're doing a lot of upskilling, so deepening of the skills that we already have, kind of doubling down. And it's just important to be aware of that. these skills have brought us to where we are today, and they're not wrong, but if we continue to invest professional development dollars, training effort, hours of time in getting better at the things we already know how to do, we're missing out. And so there's a huge opportunity, not just with AI or with data, with any of the types of services we want to build, to be able to extend that range of comforts and expertise into these areas of learning how to learn, being ready for the future. And so continuing to do what we're doing will create marginal improvements in how we're managing information, but we may lose that community aspect. So reskilling is the development of skills outside of your current repertoire. And this is something that there's a huge opportunity to do. I think the other piece is that this focus on the familiar, it really squeezes out the time and budget to do new things. And there's an opportunity cost for continuing to double down on what we already know, and that comes at the readiness to work with the university on policies related to AI or how to engage. It comes at a delay of experimentation or hackathons related to skill development for the staff, to invite them to come along and be part of this work with data and AI. And so that has a cost. I think it has potential costs in terms of recruitment long term. One of the things that we noticed in the between groups analyses of the survey responses around comfort with working with AI and data was that staff who were in their first 1 to 2 years working in an organization had higher rates of confidence working with these types of technologies. There's a lot of other people that are working in libraries that could benefit from access to this expertise too. And those folks in our organizations will want to continue to grow those skills and extend into new areas. I think the other, and Paul brought this up as well, was around who people talk to about their skill development. Many people are talking to their line managers, but a lot of people are talking to their peers inside the library or beyond, and I think it could contribute to this insularity of a very library information-focused skill development conversation. So I think there are many ways that we could extend. So extending that range into reskilling, developing new capacities, extending the range of who you're talking to about career development and growth. So partners on campus related to student success, teaching and learning excellence, data and IT, those are all potential people to expand that circle, as well as understanding user needs and to develop those kind of bridge skills. And there's a lot of hope here. Libraries and the people that work in them are there because they're naturally curious, they're really engaged with serving the community, and it's a matter of creating some of the structures and policies that help people to shift their comfort zone. So I want to leave you with a few takeaways of potentially some hope and things to do. So naming something helps to make it real, and understanding the skills that people have, the things that the areas they desire to grow, or the work that's important to them is a great first step. This is something that a tool like Skilltype can help with, but there are other methods to do this. Creating space for experimentation with room for learning through failure is another piece, and really encouraging reskilling, so developing in those adjacent complementary areas within professional development budgets, I think will help take this a longer way with leaders and managers who are in the room. This is for you. And then promoting these bridge skills like assessment, user experience, relationship building, really understanding learning science and digital pedagogy, marketing, being able to communicate the value of the library in terms of the problems that faculty and students are facing, and building the skills within managers and leaders to be able to recognize the strengths, potential gaps, or to facilitate reskilling so that it can happen. And then for librarians, really learning about those problems of faculty and students, whether they're encountering them with AI and data or something else. Discussing skill development with colleagues that are outside of your typical circle, or getting involved in events around pedagogy, data, and digital and AI that complement your current experience. And seeking out information, doing your data gathering and research as librarians do, to talk with managers, leaders, or mentors around curating your skills toolkit. All the work we've done to understand collections and how they're used by people, this could also be applied to the skills that folks have within library organizations as a rare and special kind of collection. So I think there's hope there. There are areas for alignment. People want to learn, and they put a lot of commitment to coming to events like Charleston. And events like Charleston are trying to embrace some of these trends, but there's a lot of doing at home to follow up, and there are ways to get started. And please have a look at the report, and we also welcome your questions.
Well, thank you so much to the speakers for giving us so much in such a small amount of time. But we now have plenty of time for questions. We've got 15 minutes. I have a couple of questions up my sleeve, but I'd love to turn the floor to you first of all.